Hi everyone, Ms. Mazzola here, ready for another math lesson. Today we're going to be covering perimeter, which might be a review for some of you, but it'll be good review. So grab a notebook, grab a piece of paper, something to write with. You can take some notes and it'll help you with your assignment and to understand what you are doing with perimeter. Here we go. So just like with area, with perimeter, what we need to understand first is what perimeter means. So if you've got your paper and your pencil or something to write with, you might want to write down this definition just to remind you for later what you're looking for when you're finding the perimeter of a shape. So the perimeter of a shape is the distance around the outside of a shape. And I like to put a little note in my perimeters to remind me that it's kind of like a fence. Think about your yard or any yard or even the schoolyard around the play set has a fence. It's got a perimeter. So it's an amount of fence that goes around the outside. And when we're measuring perimeter, we're just finding that distance of how much fence we need, okay? And so kind of like area, perimeter has an equation that we can use if the shape is four-sided. Otherwise, it adjusts a little bit based on the sides. So if it's a four-sided shape, we do length plus height plus height. Or you can alternate length plus height plus length plus height. So really what we're doing here with this one is we're adding all sides, okay? So that's why the equation can change. If you have a triangle, you're not going to have 4 of these to be able to add together. You're going to have 3 because it's a triangle. It's got 3 sides. If you've got a side that's got or a shape that's got 10 different sides, you're going to have 10 different numbers in here in your equation that you're adding. So this is just for 4-sided shapes, but it works for most of the ones that we see or have seen up to this point. Other than that, it's really just adding all the sides together. So we're going to look at some different ways that you might see that today. An example that would go with this definition that would be a simple way to model it would look something like this. So if we've got a shape like this, what you're doing is you're counting the length on each side. So we find out that this side over here has got 1, 2 of those tick marks. So we would label it with a 2. Then across the top, we've got 1, 2, 3 of them. So that one gets labeled with a 3. And depending on what you're using to measure with, that will determine what your units are. So for pretend, maybe we're measuring meters here. So we put our M for meters. So when you're measuring the perimeter of a shape, you're measuring the outside distance. So I'm measuring this side plus this side plus this side plus this side. Okay, now you might be thinking, but wait, Ms. Mazzola, we don't have a number here or here. Well, that's when you have to use your knowledge of shapes to know what those sides should be. This side's going to be the same as that side, and the top is going to be the same as the bottom because I know that's how rectangles work. So when I go to do my addition, I'm going to keep that in mind. So if I'm going to do my 2 lengths, so if I want to think of my lengths as these, I'm going to do 2 plus 2, and then I have to add my heights, plus 3, and that's going to give me my perimeter. So then I would just take my time and group these together and add these up. These give me 4, these 2 give me 6. Add that together and I get perimeter of 10. Then we just have to bring our units of measure back in. So these were measured in meters. Now you might think, well, with area we had to put a meter squared. Well, that was because we were measuring how many squares are inside of this. If you look at what we're measuring and you trace it with your finger, we've got this piece, this piece, this piece, all these little pieces around the outside. We're only measuring a straight edge. So if we're only measuring a straight edge, we don't have a full square there that we're measuring. So we don't have to have a unit squared on perimeter. We're just measuring how much, you can think of it like rope, how much rope you're stretching to go from here to here to here and back again to close the shape. So for this one, we would get an answer of 10 meters for our perimeter. Okay, so now grab your piece of paper and see if you can work through these next few with me. So if we've got a shape that looks like this, and it's got side lengths of 5 centimeters, 7 centimeters, 4 centimeters, and 12 centimeters, we want to know what the perimeter equals. So to do that, we just have to add up all these sides. We have 2 lengths and 2 widths essentially on this same shape, or lengths and widths, however you like to think about it. And we have to add these all up. So what I like to do when my numbers are different and I get a bunch of them is I like to go through a process, and I'll show you my strategy. This may work for you, you may not need it. All depends. So I'm just gonna start writing down my numbers, and I go clockwise around my shape because it helps me keep track of where I'm at. And then I'll cross out a number after I've written it down. So if I start, I like to start, excuse me, I like to start at the bottom of my shapes when I start to count my numbers. So I'm going to start by writing a 12 over in my equation. And then I'm going to cross out my 12. Then I'm going to go clockwise around my shape. And my next number is 5. So I've got 12 plus 5. Cross that one out. Next would be 7. And finally, I've got 4. And that would bring me right back to the start. So if I have a 12 plus a 5 plus a 7 plus a 4, that'll give me the length of fence or the length of rope, whatever it is, to connect this shape and trace the outside edge of it. Then my last step is to just combine these and find out what I need. So you can decide how you group them. I like to just put terms that are next to each other. Terms mean the options you have next to each other together, and then just add from there. So 12 plus 5 is 17, 7 plus 4 is 11. And if I put those together, I get my answer of perimeter equals 28. And then I have to put my units of measure in. So this was in centimeters. So 28 centimeters would be my answer for this shape. I don't need units squared, remember, because I'm not counting squares. You look on this one especially, this little piece on these sides, these aren't even squares. They're diagonal lines that are cutting through the squares on my grid. So we have to be careful that we don't put our squared on perimeter. It's just the outside measurement. All right, let's take a look at another one. And this one's gonna be a little more tricky. See if you can keep from getting tricked. All right, if my shape looks like this, and I have a side length labeled 8 meters, what is my perimeter going to be? So you might be looking at this going, well, Mrs. Mazzola, how am I supposed to figure that out? You only gave me one side length. This is where your knowledge of shapes is important for solving perimeter. Now you have to look at, well, why did they only give me one number with this shape? What's important about it for me to know? Then you might notice this shape is a square. And what do I know about squares? Squares, I know, have all the same side lengths. So if they're all the same side lengths, if it's a square, I know that this is going to be 8, this is going to be 8, and this is going to be 8. But they don't have to write that for me. It wastes their time, because if I know it's a square, then I will know automatically from them telling me one side what the other sides are going to be also. So you have 2 different ways you can solve this kind of one. And you may already have started solving this one, just adding up your sides. So you've got 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8. Maybe you went through and crossed out on your clockwise going around. But then you notice, wow, I think I've learned a simpler way for this instead of doing the same addition over and over and over again. And if you thought that, you are correct. We have learned in 4th grade and even 3rd grade that multiplication is just repeated addition. It's a shortcut for it. So instead of doing 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8, I could rewrite this as 8 times 4, because I have 4 of those 8s. And I can calculate it with multiplication on this one because it's the same thing over and over. Otherwise, if they were different numbers, I'd want to use my addition. So for the sake of being a 4th grader, knowing my multiplication pretty well, I'm going to go ahead and solve it with the multiplication 8 times 4. So 8, 16, 24, 32. So that gives me my answer of perimeter equals 32 on this one. And it gave me my measurement unit down here of meters, so I need to put that back in. So 32 meters would be my final answer on this one. Okay, so don't get tricked when they're giving you shapes and they only give you one side length. You have to pay attention to what you know about those shapes. All right, last one. This one might be a little bit more tricky. So if you're given a shape that looks like this, and you have side lengths of 150 feet, 210 feet, you might look at that and go, wow, those are really big numbers, but that's okay. You know how to add those numbers. But then you also might be thinking, well, Ms. Mazzola, I'm missing sides again. This is another one where you have to remember what you know about shapes. So you have to think, okay, that last one was a square. So I knew that all the sides were the same. But looking at this shape, is it a square? You're right, it's not. It's different, especially because of my numbers. 210 and 150 are different. So I know that from that knowledge, this is a rectangle. And so what I know about rectangles is that opposite sides on a rectangle are the same. So if I needed to, I could write in what those would be. So this side's going to be the same as this side. So I'm going to add in another 210 over here. And this side is going to be the same as this side. So I'm going to add in another 150. But if you don't need to have that there, you don't need to write it in. You can just add it into your equation when you go to solve. You could just go ahead and put your equation together from the beginning. You could do 150 plus 150 because you know you have two of them, plus 210 plus 210 because you know you have two of those. Then you can combine your terms and find out your answer from there. Or you can do what you did here and you can go around and do 150, cross it out, plus 210, plus 150, plus 210. Ran out a little bit of space there, okay? Either one is fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my terms together. This gives me 300. This gives me 420. And I wanna add those together to get my final answer. Perimeter equals 720. And in this case, it was feet. So I put my feet measurement there on the end, okay? So when you're solving perimeter, don't forget that you're adding all of your sides together. It's just like building a fence for your house or your backyard. You don't want to multiply a side length times a side length. That gives you the space inside of your yard. You want to know how much this side of your yard is and this side of your yard and coming back. You don't want to multiply those. And then that's why we don't have squared units at the end of our answers, because we're not measuring squares. We're just measuring a length in feet or kilometers or centimeters, whatever it is that you're measuring with. So make sure that you know your shapes and know what attributes they have, and be careful when marking your units. Good luck, everybody.